When you are feeling safe and secure in your own life, if you're in a place in your life where you're not worrying about where your next meal is going to come from, or if you're going to be able to stay in your house, all those kind of basic concerns, it is really easy to avoid doing anything that might jeopardize your sense of well-being. You see injustice and cruelty in the empire, but there is nothing you can do about it, or so you tell yourself.
So a couple of weeks ago, we heard the story of Haman's plan to annihilate all the Jews in the Persian Empire after feeling slighted that Queen Esther's cousin Mordecai didn't bow down to him. So Haman convinced the king to give him the authority to take control of the Jewish invasion. So Mordecai contacts Esther. Mordecai told her everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave her a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, and he told her to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Esther responded to her cousin Mordecai, "All the king's officials and all the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death, unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king." He replied, Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?
So what does it take to move a person to do something, do anything that might jeopardize their own sense of well-being or even of safety? Now for me, I have come to find out that it's kids. At the core of my being, I am a father. The loving protection of children is tied to my soul. And I remember it was a few years back, and I remember because I was crashed out on my couch watching television one evening when I got a call from Damon Daniels. And Damon he's a local community organizer that I'd gotten to know through our church's involvement with community organizing, through Justice and Witness. And he was calling because he was in tears because he was healing. He had just gotten released from the hospital. What had happened was he had gone out to Ferguson after Michael Brown's shooting, and he had organized a group of kids to do something positive, to do a voter registration booth. And those kids had been out just registering people to vote, and there had been a movement through. They didn't think that they had to run because they weren't doing anything wrong. And these teenagers were shot with rubber bullets, and they had these huge, huge bruises on their sides, as did he. And for me, that is what got me off the couch. I decided I needed to go to Ferguson to do what I could do to nonviolently protect kids. For me, it's about kids. I know that that's the thing that will get me off the couch, to jeopardize my own sense of well-being and safety. And the story about Esther doesn't say exactly what was inside of her that was her thing, her internal motivation. But she had her thing because she acted. Do you know what yours is? Do you know what that thing inside of you is that would move you from going away from your sense of safety or well-being for the sake of a neighbor who you might never know? Back in 1944, during the Second World War, the Nazis were getting desperate. On the west, the Allies had landed at Normandy, and on the east, the Red Army was starting to move in like this. And a Spanish diplomat had been assigned to Budapest. And in Budapest at this particular time, there were 80,000 Jews remaining. These were the only Jews that had not been yet sent off to the death camps. And this man, his name was Angel Sanbris. He had diplomatic immunity. And so as long as he didn't do anything crazy, he was relatively safe. He wasn't in Germany. He was outside of that. So he was relatively safe if he just kept his head down. He had a wife and he had 5 kids. He had a lot to lose. But what happened, and this didn't make any sense, but of course things don't need to make sense. It didn't make sense for Haman to want to kill every single Jew in the Persian Empire just because he got slighted. His little ego got damaged by one person. It didn't make sense that the Germans would use valuable resources to round up 80,000 Jews to exterminate them when they could have used those resources in other ways to keep the war effort alive even. But yet, that's what happened. Even in our present day fears, we are a long way from that kind of horror. Thank God. May we never see a time such as that. May we never allow anything like that to ever get close. Now, back in her day, Queen Esther didn't really have any real power in the empire. Not really. She barely even saw the king. And if she tries to approach him without being summoned, if she gets a little uppity like Vashti got, she could be executed. Her cousin Haman reminds her that she too is a Jew. And if she stays silent, she could well be executed along with all the other Jews anyway. And who knows? Maybe God put you into a place that you are for just such a time as this. Maybe God has put you into the place that you are for just a time such as this. And so Esther came up with a plan to charm the king with a couple of banquets in his honor that she was going to throw for him. And we heard about the king a little bit these last couple of weeks. He has a real need to be admired. And so he was all in on the banquets to celebrate him. And this is what Camille was talking about, some of the best resistance movements in history are actually kind of corny. They aren't loud. Resistance by dinner party. Resistance by bureaucracy. You use what you got. So Angel Sanbris, he made a decision. He was moved to resist the Nazis' final solution and save as many Jews as he could. And so he, like everybody else in Budapest in those years, knew what was about to happen. They saw what was happening. Tens of thousands of Jews had already been killed. So Angel, he found an obscure law. And it was an obscure law that granted Spanish citizenship to Sephardic Jews who were exiled back in the 15th century. Because everybody knows about that law. And these are in the days before the internet, and so there was no easy way for the Germans to verify this law or not. So the Nazis agreed to allow him to grant Spanish citizenship to 200 Jews. Unfortunately, the ink smudged something, I don't know, something smudged on the letter, and Angel accidentally thought the letter said 200 families. So he granted Spanish citizenship to 200 families. Nice. And he personally paid for all 200 households to be moved out of the ghetto into apartments because he figured that eventually the Allies would get there. Now, the Red Cross kind of got wind of what he was doing, And some of the local churches got wind of what he was doing too. And these citizenship papers, this rampant bureaucracy, blew up and those papers found their way into the hands of 5,000 Jews. Now, after a few months, the Nazis, they started figuring out what was going on. But the Red Army was pretty close. And Saint Brice and his family had escaped into Switzerland.
When the king and Haman came in for the banquet with Queen Esther, the king said to her, "This is the second day we've met for wine. What is your wish, Queen Esther? I'll give it to you. What do you want? I'll give you anything. I'll do anything, even give you half the kingdom." Queen Esther said, "If I please the king, and if the king wishes, give me my life. That's my wish, and the lives of my people too. That's my desire. We have been sold, I and my people, to be wiped out, killed, and destroyed. If we simply had been sold as male and female slaves, I would have said nothing. But no enemy can compensate the king for this kind of damage." King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther, "Who is this person and where is he? Who would dare do such a thing?" Esther replied, a man who hates an enemy, this wicked Haman." Haman was overcome with terror in the presence of the king and queen. Furious, the king got up and left the banquet for the palace garden, but Haman stood up to beg Queen Esther for his life. He saw clearly that the king's mood meant a bad end for him. The king returned from the palace garden to the banquet room just as Haman was kneeling on the couch where Esther was reclining. "Will you even molest the queen while I am in the house?" the king said. The words had barely left the king's mouth before Haman's face was covered with dread. Harbona, one of the eunuchs serving the king, said, "So look, there is the steak that Haman made for Mordecai, the man who spoke up and did something good for the king. It's standing at Haman's house, 75 feet high. Impale him on it," the king ordered. So they impaled Haman on the very pole that he had set up for Mordecai.
Even after Angel Saint Brice and his family had arrived in Switzerland and into safety, there was a guy named Giorgio Perlasca who continued this whole bureaucratic ruse of handing out Spanish citizenship papers. And he was hoping that with everything going on with the war, the Nazis might not realize that he was actually the replacement Spanish. He was not the Spanish replacement diplomat. In fact, he wasn't Spanish at all. He was Italian. And more than that, he wasn't a diplomat. He was just some guy who, inspired by what he saw Angel Saint Brice doing, decided to risk his own life to step up and to create this paperwork to save Jews, to save lives. The truth is that Esther and Angel Saint Brice, they broke the law. They broke an unjust law because there are times where injustice must be resisted. Compassion is God's highest law. And each of us, every one of us, has to know when the Spirit is moving inside of you, to know when God is calling on you to perhaps jeopardize your own sense of well-being, of safety, in the name of compassion for a neighbor.
Agents in Tennessee, neighbors and activists forming a human chain to stop ICE officials from taking a man into custody. Steve Osunsami has more. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning to you, Robin. These federal agents are, of course, doing their jobs and enforcing the law, but the following is also true. These neighbors are listening to their conscience. This is the scene playing out in cities across the country. Neighbors taking on ICE agents. In Nashville, they formed this human chain, successfully blocking 2 immigration agents from taking away a father who's lived here for the last 14 years. He was inside the white van with his son.
All of us just came together and we did the right thing. people that did it for a million other families. We'll do it today, we'll do it tomorrow. This is what America is all about.
Even the sheriff refused a call to the scene, saying in a statement this morning that his office does not in any way participate in ICE raids.
Will you pray with me? Holy Spirit, you have moved people in every time. And in a time such as this, you call once again to open our eyes and respond in the name of compassion, your highest law. So in your holy presence, may each of us ask, what does it take to move me in the name of compassion to jeopardize my own sense of well-being? And then give me the courage to respond with you as my guardian and guide. Amen.